What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a PO Box, and I don't think Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Sam, last time we spoke was in June, and it right around the time of the No Kings protests, the original one. And here we are now. We're past the halfway point in October, and there's another one scheduled for this Saturday. And one of the things that I said back in June, I didn't know if anything major was going to come out of it, and it turned out that it was a lot of older boomers, the term people were saying, and it was nothing happened, nothing drastic happened. But what I thought was really, I was interested. One of the things that, I was surprised the amount of organization on a nationwide basis that this brought. And, now we got a 2.0 coming this week. And I'm like, oh, well, they've already been through this. They did the test run in June. What do you think about this happening this Saturday?
Well, I mean, and I think we probably touched on this when we were talking the first time about their first iteration. I mean, the first thing people need to understand is this is like so many of these other events. It gets presented as, using all the usual buzzwords, right? Grassroots organizations, community-based thing. You're supposed to believe this is just a bunch of average people who just sort of spontaneously rise up and do this. So the first thing to understand is that that's crap, and that this is a very highly orchestrated thing. And there are a lot of organizations, very radical organizations with access to a lot of money that pull this all together. Now, what the average person thinks who participates in this, may be a different deal, but this is big, very powerful, well-funded, very radical organizations putting this together. The second thing that I think of in regard to, this 2.0, if that's what we're calling it, is I think the way I put it the other day was the temperature is rising, right? The things are becoming more extreme and more violent and more provocative all the time. So we are not in a static situation. Things are getting much more volatile. I mean, this is all occurring against the backdrop of Charlie Kirk being murdered and people trying to kill President Trump twice, and attacks on ICE facilities. We're headed in a really bad direction, is the way I feel.
Do you anticipate something this go around, or what are your expectations 2.0 versus the original?
Well, I think whether it is, as part of, I anticipate that there's a really high likelihood of violence. So whether that occurs as part of a formal 2.0 protest, or sort of connected to it, or on the margins of it, or however that goes down, I think that the likelihood of violence is very high, and not just violence as in, I mean, there will definitely be issues in the street. People assaulting cops, people assaulting counter protesters. But the potential, for somebody to blow something up or people to get shot, I mean, I think that increases every day. That's the direction we are headed. We are not, again, in a static situation. We got a lot, and it's not just irresponsible rhetoric. I mean, in my estimation, In my view, this has increasingly become the go-to tactic of the far left in this country. They want violence. They intend to use violence. It's now a political tool for them. So it's not just they say stupid stuff and then some crazy guy does something. They they want this to happen, actually.
Do you think it's an inevitability of where this is going?
Well, that again, it is it is deliberate and it is intentional, right? So that they are going to that they folks in the far left are going to do this, I think is ordained. The question is what we're going to do in response to it, in my estimation. I mean, waiting for a person to get shot and then going out and treating it as a discrete crime and confining yourself to arresting that guy and then prosecuting him. I'm not suggesting he shouldn't be arrested or prosecuted, but confining yourself to that and ignoring the fact that you have these very large, very well-funded organizations across the country. To me, that's kind of self-defeating. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, great, you arrested the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. Should he be arrested? Yes. Should he go to prison for the rest of his life and or be executed? Yes. Does that solve the problem? No. I mean, there's you have to tear the thing out by the roots, I guess is what I'm saying. And so far, I don't see the indications that we're doing that. I hear people say things that sound tough, but I don't see the action behind it.
Yeah, I look at, this Saturday, the federal government shutdown. To me, it doesn't seem like either side is really interested in getting this thing solved. And as each day passes, how much more pissed off are people going to become when they're not getting their checks? Even though I think if they're furloughed, they'll get their back pay, but people are living paycheck to paycheck in this country. And I'm not saying that there needs to be a complete overhaul of the federal government. I'm just looking at it where we're at right now and the people that are not working, combined with this protest, plus the fact that it's not summer anymore. The weather's going to be a lot better where people could be out all day causing havoc. Like, that's one of the things in Arizona, where I live, protests in the summer, I kind of laugh because how long are people going to stay out there when it's 118? This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of those things I think are dead on, man. I mean, in regard to the shutdown, we're sort of just getting to the first crunch point, right? Because up until now, I mean, I've lost track of exactly when federal paychecks come through, but up until now, basically, people haven't felt the pain. They're hanging out at home. Okay, when the checks don't show up, that's a big deal. And look, federal workers get paid well, but Washington, you got a huge number of them in Washington, D.C. as an example. Well, Washington's not cheap. It's ridiculously expensive to live in Washington, D.C. You pay huge amounts just to rent a one-bedroom apartment. So yeah, you're dead on, man. I mean, these folks are not sitting in Washington, D.C. on a stack of money, and they can go 6 months without, they themselves are living paycheck to paycheck, and that will add fuel to the fire. Now, I'm not suggesting the average federal worker's going to go out and pick up a rifle, but it won't help, right? It's a big deal, and I don't know. I mean, they certainly have all been paid in the past retroactively when the budget comes through, and I'm assuming that's going to happen. Although Trump has said some things recently as if it's not going to happen, and I don't know quite how to reconcile all that.
Is it? And I didn't bother to look. What is the longest it has ever gone? I think 21 days or 35 days, something like that.
I've lost track, but I mean they have been relatively brief, if that's a right term. I mean, the thing is, I don't know in terms of the budget impasse. First of all, I don't really understand why the Democrats, I mean, I do understand why the Democrats have done this because I think the far left of the party drives the train now. And they feel like they have to do something to demonstrate their opposition to Trump, so we're going to shut it down. What I don't understand is what leverage they think they have over Trump. I mean, the because his base is not federal workers in the Washington D.C. area or federal bureaucrats. I mean, overwhelmingly those people didn't vote for him. So, in other words, they already hated him and they're already opposed to him. So I'm not sure politically he feels like he's paying a price for this. I think he feels like they're the ones who are taking the hit on this. So I think they've kind of been backed. They, being the Democrats, have taken this because the far left of their party has pushed them to do it, and I'm not sure they really politically thought this through. And I don't think Trump feels any pressure to concede to them. So,
Well, and you look at this. I mean, it happened at Burbank where the air traffic controllers. I don't know how many they run out of there, but they weren't working, so they had to redirect the air traffic controllers out of San Diego to the Burbank airport, which is like a 120-mile difference. So it's every day. I'm actually supposed to fly this weekend, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I don't even want to go anywhere right now. Maybe it's smart to just stay home.
well, look, I mean, there will be, as much as people may want to say, look, I don't care if the government shut down, there will be already are real world consequences for this. I mean, this is not any way to run a railroad, to use the old expression, right? Just shutting down the government, sending everybody home. I'm all for cutting the size of the government, reducing cost. I'm all for that. This is not really the preferred methodology, I guess. There will be real consequences for this. So we need to get a result for sure.
But again, I mean, it doesn't seem like either side is working towards anything. I mean, from what I'm following. I mean, we're 16 days in, and doesn't appear anywhere close to being resolved.
I agree with you 100%. I don't from the Democratic standpoint of the Democratic Party. I I again, I mean, I'm not obviously unbiased or impartial, but I don't feel like they thought this through. I mean, the Republicans have very successfully framed this as the Democrats are shutting down the party because they want all of this money to go to illegal aliens and all sorts of other things that the people who voted Trump into office have no intention of paying for. And I don't, what, if you're going to do this, in the end, you have to expect the other side's going to give. I don't really understand what the Democrats think the Republicans will give on. I don't, I don't like they're just sort of making a dramatic point because it appeals to the left wing of their party, in my view. But I don't, okay, that's great. But when you're all done, you have to have a reasonable expectation the Republicans will concede on something. What do you think they're going to concede on? I don't see it.
So
So
you,
who knows how long it's going to go on, man?
so you take the combination of that. You got this protest coming up. You have. Here's the other thing with coming back to the protest for a second. What I don't understand, and I think I might have asked you about this last time. How can they not trace the money where all this is coming from? I mean, Americans were getting debanked, all over the place in the last administration. I, I find that hard to believe. Even sidetrack it for a second, like the cartels in Mexico. How can they not? We're talking billions of dollars.
They
How,
can.
they can or cannot.
I, they can.
Yeah.
They can. I mean, if it's not happening, it's because they're not doing it. It's not because it's physically impossible. I mean, look at everything associated with an organization like Antifa. Okay, they get money. This is not like the SVR, the old KGB, right? This is just volunteers, ad hoc people. They're recruiting medieval art majors from Reed College in Oregon, right? I mean, this is hardly the toughest nut to crack, I guess, is what I'm saying. So you ought to be able to be inside their communications, inside their funding, inside everything. I mean, if you can assemble tens of thousands of random people in a street, you're not doing that via the most secure secret communications in the world, right? That's happening face to face at rallies. It's happening by text messages. Okay, whatever commercial apps are being used. I mean, come on, if you want to and you're putting the resources into it, you know what you're doing. You ought to be able to eat all of these people's lunch and know where the money's coming from and who's running it and everything else. So if that's not happening, it's because we're not trying to do it. And I think that has been the case with the Bureau for forever. They're just really not devoting significant resources to any of these organizations.
Yeah, especially, I mean, to your point with Antifa, I mean, you have to give them what, cash or debit cards?
Cash, debit cards. But look, I mean, the real what's what you have are a whole series of organizations um, at the national level that funnel huge amounts of money into Black Lives Matter, Antifa, into Redneck Revolt, the Socialist Rifle Association, Pink Pistols. There's a whole universe of these groups out there, right? And huge amounts of money comes down through things like Arabella and other dark money networks. Okay, but everybody knows that. And that's okay, that's not impenetrable. And if you're and it's not just tracking the money, it's then putting people in prison for funding terrorism and criminal activity and destruction of property and doing that, right? It's so that, I mean, again, back to my point I was making a few minutes ago, the solution to this is not to arrest the guy with the rifle who just already killed somebody. Again, should he be arrested and face consequences? Obviously. But the real solution to this is to tear this thing out by the roots, which means, okay, who the hell is funding all this? I mean, you got No King's Day across the country. I mean, you don't have to be a wizard. Go online and start doing a little research into No King's Day. Start by going to their website and look at all the groups they list as sponsors, and then go from there. And what you'll realize really quickly is behind them are a bunch of radical leftist groups with access to huge amounts of money. So it's put those guys out of business. Go back and cut it off at the source instead of waiting to arrest the one guy who's breaking a window or something.
Do you think that what's occurring in Chicago and Portland now, where the local and state officials are giving the finger to the federal government, saying we don't want you here, you don't need your help, get out, whatever we can to hinder, your tasks. Are we in a civil war already, Sam?
Well, I don't know if we're in a civil war. We're on the cusp of one. I mean, what you have are activities by state governments and by municipal governments that are really teetering on the edge of insurrection, sedition, right? Um, you had Trump announced some time ago he was going to nationalize elements of the Oregon National Guard. Okay, the commander in chief has the authority to do that. The National Guard works for the governor, responds to state authority until such time as they're nationalized. When they're nationalized, they are called up to federal service, and the commander in chief tells them what to do. That's all crystal clear law. There's no ambiguity about any of that. So he said, I'm nationalizing elements of the National Guard. They're now in federal service, and I'm giving them these orders. So the governor of Oregon responded by saying she wasn't going to allow him to do that. So this is the governor of a state telling the commander in chief, the guy who the Constitution designates as head of the armed forces, that she's not going to allow him to use what are now federal troops. Okay, well, I mean, just think about the implication. That's a state governor saying somehow or another her authority supersedes that of the constitutionally directed commander in chief. Um, Stuff that's, happened in Chicago. What, 2 weeks ago now, there were ICE agents on the street in a vehicle, and they were essentially ambushed by a number of vehicles filled with these radical protesters. They cut them off, blocked them in. Folks started getting out of the car surrounding the ICE vehicle. At least one of them was armed. The agents ended up having to open fire on these people to get out of there. Okay, so obviously they're in the car out over the radio. They put this call. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. They're requesting assistance, requesting backup. That goes out. Everybody hears that. Chicago PD starts to respond. They get a call from their headquarters, and I think this was done at the direction of the mayor. Stand down, don't go, we're not sending anybody. Now, after that, the mainstream press sort of tried to obfuscate this and, make it seem like, okay, maybe it wasn't that clear cut. You can listen to the 911 call online. You can hear the 911 operator going back and forth with headquarters, obviously sort of stunned by what she's being told to say. And the guy who she's talking to becomes progressively more and more direct. In fact, I think his final statement is something to the effect of, you see, it sounds kind of annoyed. We're not sending anyone. Like, sort of like, can I make this any clearer to you, lady? Tell everybody to stay away. We're not sending one. So this is law enforcement officers who potentially by this point could have been dead. And the Chicago PD, at the direction of the mayor, apparently says, we won't help. In Portland, around the federal building, everybody knows, I think, that building is essentially under siege every night by Antifa. Portland PD has the 4-block area around that building. They don't go there. They have taken that area, 4-block area around the federal building, and conceded it to Antifa's control. Cops will not go there. They don't respond. They've just turned over that area to this radical anarchist organization, and the feds are completely on their own. So there's a lot of stuff like that happening. You look at that and you think, all right, well, clearly we have state and local government has taken the size of the folks of the radicals, and yeah, they're in complete conflict with the federal government.
Well, and I mean, you had the mayor of Chicago. He created those ice-free zones
Mm-hmm.
based on an executive order, and that's why I wonder: it's just a different form of a civil war, the stage it's in right now?
Well, look, I mean, what Chicago has said, what the mayor has said, is he's essentially ordered federal forces to leave, right? And in Portland, they've basically done the same thing. Okay, well, if you think about it, how is that different than what they said in Charleston, South Carolina in 1861 when they ordered the federal troops at Fort Sumter to leave and then subsequently opened fire? I mean, the first step in that was them saying federal forces are not welcome here. The federal government must leave our jurisdiction. I mean, in Oregon, in Illinois, in California, they have said basically word for word exactly the same thing. So those are pretty radical. I mean, that's pretty radical things, and obviously the implications of that are that, you know, when you got Antifa in the street, it's not just a bunch of crazy guys wearing black. I mean, they are the Democratic Party, at least elements of the Democratic Party, are in league with these people and using them for political purposes. I mean, it's basically a way of opting out of the Constitution and our whole rule of law structure. It's like we're going to settle this by turning the mob loose in the street. That's how we're going to settle.
Yeah, I don't know if you follow on X Katie Davis Court. I talk about her a lot, but she's been up in Portland. She got punched in the face.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, these guys, and often what happens is people are attacked by these guys. The cops don't do anything if there are cops there. And or what happens is you are assaulted, threatened, put in fear of your life. Then you respond to defend yourself, and the cops arrest you, as has happened to journalists in
Nick Sorter.
Oregon.
Nick Sorter just got arrested.
That's exactly who I was thinking of. Basically defends himself, and then he's now going to face criminal charges for defending himself. Because in effect, I mean, the practical result of this is what the cops are really saying is Antifa rules. Antifa's in control. You should not be here because they're in control of this area. Okay, this radical anarchist organization is in control, and their rules, they're in charge. And if you're here, you're the problem. We've turned over the streets to them. So you are the provocateur. You're causing the issue because you are not acknowledging that they get to control this area.
Well, the other thing is, and people are so stupid, Sam. Not that I'm the smartest guy in the world, but like I see people that are saying, seeing these images in Portland just reminds me how happy I am that I live here, because you see images of people dressed up in Furbies and not even realizing what they're attempting to do to goad these people. I don't know if that's the right word I'm using, to instigate some type of violent attack on people wearing animal costumes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you take a couple steps back and look at the big picture, this is my thesis, right? This is not just law enforcement or civil authorities being weak, having no spine, not acting forcefully enough. This is not just Democratic politicians saying things that are irresponsible and provoking. I mean, all of those things, I guess, are true. But there's a much more fundamental thing going on here, which is people on the left, the radicals in our society, and I'm talking politically now. I mean, people holding public office, major figures in the Democratic Party, have decided to use mob violence in the streets as a political tool. It's not just they have allowed it to get out of control, they're not acting. No, that misses the central point. They are using violence in the streets as a political tool. You can't get what you want via the constitutional means, votes in the Senate, votes in the House of Representatives, etc. Then you turn the mob loose. You don't just turn the mob loose, because even that doesn't grasp it. You organize and really equip and direct these forces. So this is how you are going to get your way, is by doing this. And look, this is what the Roman Republic saw 2,000 years ago, right? They got to a point in the waning days before the Republic disintegrated where politicians did exactly the same thing. They essentially organized armies of thugs. So it's, why bother to debate something in the Senate? The Romans had a Senate too. No, you don't. If you don't give me my way and do what I want, I will come to your house, I will burn your house down, I will physically assault you, or I'll shut down the whole friggin' city. I will turn the mob loose. And honestly, I mean, if you think about it, we've already seen this for years, right? How many major cities in 2020 where the mob just tore the cities apart for days and weeks at a time? That's where we are. We don't want to face it, but that's where we are. And that's why I keep coming back to The answer to this is not just arresting the dude on the street, the guy with the gun, the guy smashing window. The answer is you have to take out the organizations that are behind this. And I'm not talking about preventing people from speaking, pop, free speech, anything. But the use of violence for political purposes can't be tolerated. And we got to approach it at that level. And I don't think we are.
Well, and that's where I've been getting some heat for saying this. I'm going to say it to you, and you tell me what you think. But I said with the whole deployment of the National Guard, I said it's a slippery slope, and I said people ought to be careful what they wish for, and it also shows the state of things where they're at. Initially I was opposed to it. I'm not saying I'm for it right now, but what do you do? Because and just look at both sides of it. What's the end game once you deploy them, right? Like when, how does this? At some point they have to leave. You're going to have them there forever. You're going to have federal troops in uniform with assault rifles in Chicago forever. But the other side of it, the local and state officials, they don't want to solve this. So I don't even know what the answer is anymore to this.
Well, look, I I share your concerns about the use of the National Guard, right? I think it's one of those things where you need to stop and you need to think this through, right? The imagery, maybe the the idea that okay, look, we're getting tough on these guys. The imagery of that can be powerful, but then there are all the questions that you just touched on. Okay, how long are we going to do this? Well, I mean, they got to go home eventually. So what happens when they go home? And also, what happens when the National Guard actually has to open fire and shoot people? Have you gotten to that point where you're shooting people, shooting folks? Now, from a political standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from every standpoint, what then? But also, it's like I keep coming back to this. Like, okay, so you got a bunch of Antifa guys and they're rampaging and they're attacking a federal building and the National Guard is there and they're protecting the building. Okay, fine. But that doesn't solve the bigger problem. Who's directing them? Who's organizing them? Who's financing them? That piece of it seems to me so far to be completely missing from our strategy. I mean, there are huge networks involving NGOs, in some cases foreign money, involving leftist billionaires, financing this, directing us. We got No King's Day coming up, 2.0. We'll see how much violence is associated with that. That is not just, again, it's not happening because a bunch of grassroots people got together. It's being organized at a national level, directed. There is a permanent staff behind No King's Day, behind Indivisible, which is the group that runs it, and then a whole collection of groups that feed money into Indivisible. And all of these folks are well known and well established. Anybody who's doing this and engaged in violent and illegal activity ought to be being arrested, and the funds ought to be seized. Again, I'm not talking about, you know, doing away with the First Amendment. We're not talking about preventing people from speaking. But if you are organizing and encouraging and fomenting violence and pushing for the overthrow of the U.S. government, then somebody ought to be arresting you, and your funds ought to be seized, and your group ought to be shut down. If you are a revolutionary organization trying to destroy the republic, we ought to be locking you up. And that whole piece, to me, again, I don't see that. I don't see any evidence that it's happening.
What is your primary concern right now? I mean, you're writing about following. Is it domestically or international or?
Wow. I mean, all of the above. Look, I think we have in this country what is a revolutionary movement in this country in the sense that it wants to destroy the republic. And it is largely Marxist. And honestly, it's been ongoing for a really, really long time. Everything is escalating. And I don't, again, see that we are strategically. I mean, the first part of the solution is say out loud that that's what is happening, and then respond. Stop pretending like it's not happening. Abroad, we still don't have a solution to the Russian-Ukraine war. Not that Trump isn't trying, but and the Russians are still threatening the use of nuclear weapons, so that whole thing can slide off the rails. We're coming real close to confrontation time with the Chinese. I mean, because the Chinese have, I think, assumed that Trump was going to talk tough on some things, but not actually fundamentally change the status quo, which favors them. They get richer and more powerful all the time. And I think they have now moved by saying that they're going to cut off rare earth minerals to us to trying to force him to back down, which he's not going to do. There's no way in hell he's going to back down and knuckle under the. So we're sort of getting to crunch point here where I think Trump was hoping, and I understand why, that the Chinese would accept that they were going to have to begin to change their behavior and just accept that and accede to it and allow this to proceed in without any direct confrontation. And right now, I'm afraid that's not happening. I don't know. We got a peace deal in Gaza. I'm not sure it's working. I'm not sure that's things not going to slide off the rails. We'll see. Hopefully, there are people behind the scenes like the Qataris pressuring Hamas enough that Hamas will be forced to cooperate, but jury's out on that. Uh, and I don't know exactly where we're going with Venezuela. We're blowing up drug boats coming out of Venezuela. Now we're talking about covert action inside Venezuela, and we've sent a lot of forces south toward Venezuela. I'm, I guess I'm a little unclear on what our long-term strategy is with that, unless it's just to make the Venezuelans change course. But we'll see if they do or not.
You know, we've talked in the past, and you've always one of the things you've said that it's always stuck in my head. You know, it's like the United States just drops bombs, and there's no plan, no strategy, and then just figure out after. When I think of Venezuela, I'm like, okay, what? I don't want to say we because I'm not involved in this. What are they doing here? We're blowing up boats, it's like Miami Vice.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. I mean, look, if you're blowing up boats because what you're trying to tell them, I mean, in addition to cutting off those drugs didn't get here. You're trying to get them to accept the fact that we're not going to allow you to get the drugs here and then try to catch the guy in a street corner with them. We're going to the source and we're not going to let you move these anymore. Okay, there's a certain logic there. If we're now shifting, they will, of course, after they stop sending stuff via boats in that fashion, that doesn't mean they will not then send the drugs some other way. So, you know, as soon as you cut off that route, there will be another route. So you better have planned ahead for how you plan on interdicting those drugs. But that part of it, I guess, seems to me to be a certain logic. I mean, look, if we in fact have the intel to identify these boats, blowing up the boat is child's play for the U.S. military, right? That you fire ammunition from some aircraft that the boat can't even friggin' see, and the boat is vaporized. And then you go back to the carrier or go back wherever you flew from. But if we're now shifting to the idea, like when you start talking about covert action inside Venezuela, it makes me wonder, okay, so are we still just talking about stopping drugs? Or are we now shifting to overthrowing the government of Venezuela? Which I'd be all for because they're scumbags, but it's like, but that's a whole different gig, man. That's a much more complicated, much more open-ended task. I don't think you as much as we would love that government to be overthrown, that's not simple. They're very effective at staying in power. So yes, I do have that big concern. Is this another open-ended thing where we're going to kind of start doing stuff and then try to figure out the plan after we're already doing stuff?
Do you think the United States' bigger play is to pry Venezuela away from China and Russia? That maybe it's not so much about the oil, but it's like we're in a real game of Risk board game.
Well, I mean, it would be great for them to be pulled away from that, but as long as that government is in place, those are their allies. They're in bed with the Iranians, they're in bed with the Russians, the Chinese, the Cubans, all of our enemies, and we're completely hostile to them. So the more we schwack them from that standpoint, the tighter they're going to get with all those guys. I mean, the end game, obviously, for the Venezuelan people is to get rid of this ridiculous, corrupt communist government and return to democratic rule. I'm on board with that. I agree. Uh, to your point, where is the plan, and what will be required to do that? Because that is no easy thing. You're not going to blow up a couple of things in Caracas, and then the Venezuelan people will rise and revolt and overthrow that regime. That regime is really good at cracking heads and shooting people. Are they monsters? Yes, but they're not going to go easily. And I'm not sure we are at all prepared. Well, I know we're not prepared to do what is actually required to make that happen. Because it would probably take a full-scale invasion of Venezuela to make that happen.
And does the United States have the resources to do that at this point?
Well, probably, but do the American people want to do that? I mean, it always seems like a really cool idea to go bomb something and threaten something, and that all see, and then you show people video of stuff blowing up taken by the gun camera, and that seems like it all seems like a friggin' video game. Okay, well, it won't seem like a video game when you got tens of thousands of American troops on the streets in Caracas and guys are coming home in body bags and people begin to ask the questions like, I'm sorry, what are we doing again? Like, do I want this government to go away in Venezuela? Yeah, I guess. Do I want it so bad that I'm willing to bury my son? I don't think so. And look, isn't Donald Trump the guy who's going to keep us out of war? So the idea that, I mean, I have a hard time believing Donald Trump really wants to put American troops on the ground in Venezuela, that he's prepared to do that or even thinking about doing that. So back to, I think, the point you were making originally, what's the plan? Well, why are we going to undertake covert action in Venezuela? There's a whole side point, which is, does the CIA, as constituted at present, have the capacity to conduct covert action in Venezuela and actually make it effective? I'm not confident that that's true.
Well, then we talk about Venezuela and then Russia, Ukraine. At this point, that's another one. It's like the government shutdown. It doesn't seem like either side is interested in stopping that. And then what is Europe's role in all this? Because they don't. Seems like they want this to escalate as well. All right, so we had a little bit of technical difficulties there. So Russia, Ukraine. Doesn't appear that either side wants to get this resolved. And Europe seems to want to escalate this.
Right. Well, look, I mean, this is the way I look at the Europeans. The Europeans always talk a lot and express all sorts of opinions. And the bottom line is they never actually take the lead on anything. Right. I mean, I always go back to Bosnia. On their doorstep, they watched genocide happening, and it took the U.S. Army marching down there and American airstrikes to end the war. That's the way it always is. So they'll talk a lot, and in the end, the U.S. is going to have to take the lead. And I'm not saying it should be that way, or we should like that, or anything else. I'm just saying that's the bottom line, man. We're always going to have to take point on ending it. Putin's a really hard guy. Putin was never going to just say, "Yeah, I opt for peace, love, and brotherhood. Let's end this thing." He's going to bang away as long as he thinks he has something to gain. I think Trump has master strategy here is to bankrupt Putin and take away the money he needs to run the war. He is methodically trying to cut off sales of Russian oil because that's essentially where all the money comes from that Putin needs to buy bullets, pay his troops, build tanks, etc. Without money from oil sales, he can't pay for the war. It doesn't matter what he wants. So the Ukrainians increasingly are taking out Russian refineries and oil storage facilities. And Trump is methodically going around the world pressuring countries saying, if you want to deal with us and not face horrific tariffs and have us destroy your economy, you will stop buying Russian oil. The next big domino to fall in that respect is India. So the Indians are under tremendous pressure from Trump to stop buying Russian oil. They keep saying things like, you can't tell us what to do, which you would expect. But in fact, they are already placing orders, huge orders, for non-Russian oil. So it looks to me like they are already moving themselves in the direction of weaning themselves off of Russian oil and being able to say and not face the tariffs that Trump's threatening. If those things fall into place, Vlad has no choice but to make peace. So, I mean, and to be honest, as calculating as Putin is, he probably understands all that. He's like, okay, odds are pretty good that X number of months out here, we're going to be forced to sign a deal. So in the meantime, let's take as much of Ukraine as we can and thump away as much as we can. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that you're going to see peace. It's going to be a painful process, and it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Do you think the last thing in the Middle East, you touched on Gaza and Israel. I'm under the belief, I mean, these two sides just hate each other. And how could somebody come in, broker a deal, and it'll all go away? Do you see something spiking up there?
The first stages of this peace deal are all about a ceasefire, exchanging prisoners, that kind of stuff. The Israelis sort of slowly back out of Gaza. That part, I think, is honestly the easy part. The really hard part is who's going to run Gaza and what happens to it long term. Hamas's plan is obviously they just stay there. And at some point, this is going to involve guys with guns on the streets of Gaza in providing security and getting rid of Hamas. So there's an international stabilization force that's supposed to do that per this peace deal. What I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows, is who the heck is the international stabilization force? Who's providing the soldiers that will go into Gaza to enforce this thing? It's not going to be Americans, and obviously it's not going to be Israelis. So what country is going to pony up guys to go take on that thankless task? I don't have an answer to that. And until somebody has an answer to that, I think that the chances of this thing going off the rails are pretty high. If there's an answer to that, it will be something really cold and calculated like this. The United States of America will pay the bill, and somebody else will send their troops, like Pakistanis. Pakistanis hire their guys out to the UN all the time, because they make money actually off providing peacekeeping troops. It'll be something as cold as that. It'll be like Egypt sends a bunch of guys to enforce the peace, but we're actually the ones paying the bills. And the Egyptian government will make a profit off of it.
Of course.
Of course.
And what about Iran?
And the Iranians, we will hope, will not try to blow the whole thing up they have no interest in it being solved. And keep in mind that there are people in Hamas who don't want, there are people in Hamas who will never change their minds about the fact that they want to blow the whole deal up too and burn the whole thing to the ground. They're never going to change their minds. They're not going to change direction. They're not going to be reconciled to anything else. So chances of the thing going off the rails, pretty good. I wouldn't be betting any huge amount of money on the fact that the deal works. but I hope to God it does.
Where could people find you, Sam?
Substack and the magazine, andmagazine.substack.com, and that'll take you to every place else I am on the web.
As always, I appreciate you taking time, and we'll see where things go. I mean, my other thing is, with the protests on Saturday, and then the federal government, and then you got the spike in precious metals, which I haven't looked in a couple hours to see what it's doing, but it's never a good thing when gold skyrockets. As much as people
No,
that are holding it, I mean, I have some, and I'm glad I have it, but I think people need to
yeah,
realize when you're seeing this spike up like this is not necessarily a good thing.
no, it's an indicator of instability and people are worried. That's what it is. We'll hope we make it through all of this.
And what kind of world would it be if gold goes to $10,000 an ounce? What kind of world are we going to be living in?
Yeah, that's the end of the world. Yes.
I heard Frank Justra, he's a financial person. I heard him on a show yesterday where he's saying, people that are holding gold, be careful what you wish for because what will that
Yes.
world look like if its gold is ten thousand
That's
dollars an
right.
ounce?
You're gonna have a lot of money in gold, but and everything is gonna be on fire outside your door. That's what that means.
Well, this is the last thing I was going to say. Last thing I was going to say, but this is the thing too with this. It's like, okay, let's say you have a lot of physical gold. Where are you going to take it? You're going to load it in your car. It's heavy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, there are parts of the world where, what happens is ladies basically wear the family wealth on their arms, right? In India, traditionally, when you have some cash, you buy a gold bangle and you put it on your wrist. And then as you accumulate wealth, you add another gold bangle and another one, and you'll see reasonably well-to-do ladies with gold bangles almost up to their elbows walking around. That's because you can't trust any institution in society at all with your money, and you don't even trust that you'll be able to retain your house. Like that's the ultimate. When we have to put everything in a suitcase and run for our lives, I will still have the money on my arm thing. So it may seem cute and cultural and decorative, but it's what it really means is we have no faith in anything around us. If it's not physically attached to me, I don't believe it, that it doesn't mean anything to me. That's not the kind of world you actually want to live in.
Sam, as always, thank you so much. For all listening, please go out and support Sam on a Substack, become a paid subscriber. Myself, I put all these up early for my paid subscribers and for 24-hour early access. And also, if you're on YouTube, Rumble, I look at all the comments. So like it, subscribe, share, and look forward to the next conversation, Sam.
Thanks, man.
Mic drop.